She believed her money could buy anything: respect, forgiveness, even the law itself. Melissa Vane had built her world on luxury and control. When her driver rolled through a red light that morning in Providence, she didn't see it as danger, she saw it as inconvenience. Police lights flashed, a ticket was written, and she laughed. To her, rules were for ordinary people, and she had never been ordinary. When the officer mentioned her appearance before Judge Frank Caprio, Melissa smirked. "Perfect," she whispered, "I'll teach him how real power works." But what waited inside that modest courtroom would strip every ounce of arrogance she carried. The crowd was ordinary: teachers, taxi drivers, small business owners, people who still believed justice mattered. Melissa walked past them like royalty among peasants, her heels echoing against the marble floor. Every eye turned, every whisper followed. None of them knew they were about to witness one of Judge Caprio's most unforgettable moments. A lesson in humility carved out of silence, calm, and truth. Before we show you exactly what happened inside that courtroom, take a moment to join the conversation. Drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from and what justice means to you. And if you're new here, hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because on Real Judge Stories, every case isn't just about the law, it's about the people who think they're above it, until they learn otherwise. Now let's step into that courtroom together, where laughter turned into disbelief, arrogance met reality, and one woman discovered that money can buy comfort, but never class. That morning, the courthouse in Providence buzzed with quiet anticipation. The old marble walls seemed to hum with stories of arguments, apologies, and second chances. Sunlight slipped through tall windows, striking the polished floor where officers and visitors moved like clockwork. The air carried that familiar mix of coffee, perfume, and nerves, the smell of justice on an ordinary weekday. Judge Frank Caprio took his seat, calm and focused as always. His glasses caught the light as he reviewed the day's docket, voice even and patient. Case number 7846. City of Providence versus Melissa Vane. The name stirred the room. Murmurs rolled across the benches as a tall woman in a cream suit strode forward, her confidence sharp enough to cut the air. Behind her trailed Harold Miles, her driver, shoulders slumped, hands shaking slightly. Melissa's designer bag swung at her side like a trophy, and the faint click of her heels echoed with practiced power. Across the aisle, Officer Daniel Reeves stood ready with his report. His uniform was crisp, his expression neutral, but the tension in his posture told a quieter story. Whatever had happened on that city street earlier wasn't routine. Judge Caprio lifted his eyes from the file. "Good morning, Ms. Vane. We're here about a moving violation and the remarks that followed. Let's start with Officer Reeves." The courtroom fell silent. Cameras clicked softly. Even the air seemed to pause. No one knew yet that this would become more than a traffic hearing. It would become a reminder that arrogance rarely leaves the room the way it enters. Officer Daniel Reeves adjusted the file in his hands and stepped forward. "Your Honor, on the morning of March 12th at approximately 8:15 a.m., I observed a black Mercedes failing to stop at the red light on Memorial Boulevard and narrowly avoiding a collision with a silver sedan. The driver, later identified as Mr. Harold Miles, admitted fault immediately. He was calm, respectful, and apologetic." Judge Caprio nodded once. "Continue." Reeves's voice stayed steady, but his jaw tightened. "The issue, Your Honor, was not the violation itself, it was the behavior that followed." A low hum rolled through the courtroom. Reeves glanced toward the defendant's table. "After I issued the citation, Ms. Melissa Vane exited the vehicle. She asked whether I understood who she was. When I explained that the citation applied to the vehicle's operator, she laughed and said, 'My driver doesn't pay tickets, that's what money's for.' She then walked over to the occupants of the silver sedan, Mr. and Mrs. Lane, and told them, 'If you make this messy, I'll make it expensive.'" Gasps rippled through the gallery. Melissa smirked, uncrossing her legs as if daring the room to react. Judge Caprio leaned forward. "Threats, officer?" "Yes, Your Honor." Directly and in front of witnesses. The Lanes declined to press charges at the scene, stating they were intimidated. Caprio's gaze moved back to Melissa. "Ms. Vane, is that accurate?" She tilted her head, the corner of her mouth lifting. "Depends who you ask, Judge. People hear money and start twisting stories. Jealousy's free, isn't it?" A few quiet murmurs echoed from the benches. Caprio said nothing, only closed the folder with deliberate calm. The silence thickened. Even Harold Miles shifted uncomfortably, eyes fixed on the floor. It was the kind of moment that decided what sort of story this hearing would become: a routine ticket or a public lesson on arrogance and grace. Judge Caprio finally spoke. All right, Officer Reeves. Thank you. The court has heard your account. Let's hear Ms. Vane's version next. Every ear in the room leaned forward. The real confrontation was about to begin. Melissa Vane adjusted the cuff of her jacket as if the entire room were waiting for her next move. My version, she said, a faint laugh hiding behind her words. Of course. Though I doubt anyone here will appreciate honesty. Judge Caprio's tone stayed level. Proceed. She leaned toward the microphone. My driver made a harmless mistake. We stopped a little too late and suddenly it's a whole drama. I suppose this city has nothing better to do. From the benches came a single disbelieving chuckle. Caprio ignored it. Running a red light isn't harmless, Ms. Vane. It nearly caused an accident. Oh, please, she replied, waving one manicured hand. No one was hurt. The other driver was fine. You'd think I ran over a parade the way everyone's reacting. Harold Miles shifted beside her, whispering, Ma'am, maybe don't? She cut him off without looking his way. Harold, you're paid to drive, not to defend. Let the professionals talk. Caprio's eyebrows lifted slightly. Is he also paid to take the blame? Melissa smiled, all teeth and confidence. Judge, let's be realistic. These red light cameras and tickets are city money machines. I pay more in taxes every quarter than half this courtroom earns in a year. Frankly, I'm the reason this building's lights are still on. The statement landed like a slap. A ripple of gasps passed through the gallery. Caprio removed his glasses and set them on the bench. Ms. Vane, this courtroom doesn't run on money. It runs on respect. She tilted her head, unbothered. Respect? That's earned, Judge, not demanded. The silence that followed pressed down like weight. Even the clerk stopped writing. Caprio folded his hands. You seem to find this amusing. Because it is, she said smoothly. A traffic ticket pretending to be justice. Her laughter filled the air, brittle, echoing, and the room finally understood what they were witnessing. Not a case about a red light, but a woman convinced she'd never have to stop for anyone. Judge Caprio let the echo of Melissa's laughter fade before he spoke. Ms. Vane, he said calmly, you've made several remarks that question not just this citation, but the integrity of this court. I'd like you to explain exactly what you meant. Melissa crossed one leg over the other, her voice casual. It's simple, Judge. Cities love tickets. They feed on fines. You all pretend it's about safety, but let's be honest, it's revenue. I'm just smart enough to see through it. The courtroom stirred. Someone whispered, she really said that? Caprio's expression didn't change. You believe that obeying the law is optional for those who can afford the fine? She smiled. Not optional, negotiable. That's how the world works. A murmur rolled across the benches, a mix of disbelief and disgust. Officer Reeves shifted, clearly restraining a response. Caprio leaned back slightly, his voice soft but razor-sharp. I've sat on this bench for decades, Ms. Vane. I've seen doctors, teachers, students, veterans, all of them here for one reason: accountability. And in all those years, few have been bold enough to laugh at it. Melissa met his gaze, still smiling. Maybe they just weren't confident enough to speak the truth. Her driver, Harold Miles, exhaled quietly beside her. Ma'am, please. Quiet, Harold, she hissed. Caprio's tone cooled another degree. Mr. Miles, you may speak. Harold looked startled. Your Honor, yes, I ran the light. It was my fault, not hers. She told me to keep going, I panicked. I'm sorry. The gallery rustled. Caprio nodded once. You see, Ms. Vane, your driver understands something you do not: humility. Melissa's smile flickered. Oh, come now. He's just protecting his job. Caprio folded his hands. No, he's protecting his conscience. You should try it sometime. For the first time, her confidence slipped. She looked away, then forced a laugh to reclaim the moment. Judge, you're turning a ticket into a sermon. Caprio replied quietly, sometimes the smallest cases reveal the biggest truths. The room held its breath. The duel had begun, not of anger but of patience against pride, and every second tightened the invisible line between authority and arrogance. Judge Caprio opened the folder again, his expression unreadable. Officer Reeves, before we proceed, are there any prior incidents involving Ms. Vane that the court should know about? Reeves hesitated only a moment. Yes, Your Honor. 3 years ago, her vehicle was involved in a collision with a young pedestrian. The matter was privately settled, but the report noted allegations of interference during the investigation. The room went still. Caprio's eyes lifted slowly. Is that correct, Ms. Vane? Melissa's polished smile faltered for the first time. That was years ago, Judge. A misunderstanding. The family was compensated. It's irrelevant. Irrelevant, Caprio repeated softly. A child was injured. Her tone sharpened. And they were paid more than enough to recover. I made sure of that. That's what people like me do. We solve problems efficiently. A ripple of gasps swept through the gallery. Even Officer Reeves lowered his eyes. Caprio leaned forward slightly, voice even but colder now. Money doesn't solve problems, Miss Vane. It silences them. And silence isn't justice. She scoffed. You wouldn't understand. People take advantage of success every day. The moment they see someone doing well, they find a way to cash in. I simply protected myself. Her words hung in the air like smoke, visible, heavy, impossible to ignore. Caprio spoke quietly. Do you remember the boy's name? Melissa blinked, surprised. Why would I? Because I do, Caprio replied. Ethan Cole. 6 years old. He survived, but he still walks with a brace. The color drained from her face. For the first time she had no reply. The gallery whispered in disbelief. Caprio set the file down gently. You see, Ms. Vane, what you call efficiency I call evasion. And what you call success I call emptiness. You've built walls of wealth so high that even remorse can't climb them. Melissa looked down, her voice low. Are you done lecturing, Judge? Not yet, he said softly. Because I haven't decided whether you need punishment or perspective. And with that, the tension in the courtroom transformed, from irritation to reckoning. Everyone knew the turning point had come. Judge Caprio sat back, his fingers interlocked, his eyes steady on Melissa Vane. Ms. Vane, he began softly, I've listened to your explanations, your sarcasm, and your justifications. But somewhere in all that confidence, I haven't heard a single word of accountability. Melissa crossed her arms. I'm not here for a therapy session, Judge. I came to pay a ticket, not be psychoanalyzed. Caprio didn't flinch. You came here to pay a fine, he said quietly, but what you owe isn't measured in dollars. A hush swept across the courtroom. He leaned forward slightly, his tone calm but firm. You see, I've met people who had nothing, no money, no influence, no voice, yet they walked into this courtroom and left with dignity. And then I've met people who have everything, and walk out empty. Melissa's smirk returned, weaker this time. That's poetic, Judge. Maybe you should write a book. Caprio's gaze hardened, though his voice never rose. You mistake patience for weakness. I'm not angry at you, Ms. Vane, I'm disappointed. Because arrogance is a choice and you wear it like jewelry. Her breath caught slightly. The audience stayed frozen. You believe money can rewrite consequences? Caprio continued. That's why you laughed at an officer doing his job. That's why you mocked this court. But what you don't understand is that money can hide guilt, it can even delay it, but it can never erase it. The words landed like thunder wrapped in silk. Melissa blinked, trying to recover. Do you know why justice exists? Caprio asked quietly. Not to destroy people but to remind them that truth still matters even when pride doesn't. Her lips parted but no words came. Caprio continued, his tone lowering into something almost fatherly. I've watched powerful people crumble under the weight of their own ego. And I've seen humble ones rise because they had the courage to admit they were wrong. You could have been one of them, Ms. Vane. You had that chance the moment you walked in here. She stared down, voice trembling now. You don't know me. I know enough, Caprio replied. Enough to see that success made you comfortable, but it never made you kind. For the first time, Melissa looked small, not because of the room but because of the truth sitting across from her. Caprio sighed softly, almost weary. You can pay for your driver's mistake, you can pay for your reputation, but what you can't buy is grace. And right now, Ms. Vane, grace is what you need most. The silence that followed wasn't emptiness, it was realization. And in that moment, even arrogance knew it had met its match. Judge Caprio exhaled slowly, glancing at the papers before him, though it was clear his decision had already formed long before the words left his mouth. Ms. Vane, he began, this court is limited by statute, but decency is not. You will not leave here untouched by consequence. The gallery leaned forward. First, he continued, your driver, Mr. Miles, will be fined for the moving violation as required by law. Second, you will pay full damages to Mr. and Mrs. Lane for the distress and property costs caused by your behavior. He paused, letting the silence breathe. And third, you will make an additional contribution, $10,000, to the Providence Children's Hospital. Perhaps the next time you think money can fix everything, it will remind you that it can also heal. A soft murmur of approval swept the room. Melissa's mouth opened, then closed again. The certainty in her eyes faltered. Caprio's tone stayed even. You once said you fund this city with your taxes. Consider this another kind of tax, a moral one. Payment due immediately. A few in the gallery chuckled quietly, but Caprio lifted a hand. No applause. Justice is not entertainment. It's a mirror. He turned back to her. You'll walk out of this courtroom today, Ms. Vane, not because you deserve freedom, but because the law allows it. Do not mistake that for mercy. Mercy must be earned. Melissa looked down at her lap, her voice barely audible. Yes, Your Honor. Caprio gave a single nod. Case resolved. The gavel came down with a sharp, final crack that echoed through the chamber like a heartbeat. Justice delivered, not with anger but with absolute clarity. The sound of the gavel lingered like thunder rolling into silence. Then, slowly, the room seemed to exhale. The tension that had wound itself through every minute of the hearing began to loosen, replaced by quiet awe. Melissa Vane sat frozen, her once perfect posture bent ever so slightly. The diamonds on her wrist no longer sparkled under the courtroom lights. They simply reflected the dull realization settling over her face. Harold Miles looked at her, relief and pity crossing his tired eyes. He whispered, "You should listen to him, ma'am." For the first time she didn't answer. Judge Caprio gathered the files before him, his expression composed but thoughtful. Justice, he said softly, isn't about punishment, it's about remembering who we're supposed to be. The clerk nodded as she recorded his words. Around the gallery people shifted quietly, teachers, workers, parents, each of them carrying away something more than entertainment. They had witnessed dignity win over pride. Melissa rose slowly, clutching her purse as if it could still anchor her to the life she understood. But every step toward the exit sounded different now, not the confident rhythm of power, but the hesitant echo of humility. The heavy door opened, and for a brief moment she looked back at the judge. No arrogance left, only reflection. Then she left the courtroom, the door closing behind her like the final page of a chapter she never meant to write. The crowd remained seated a little longer, as if silence itself had become sacred. Judge Caprio leaned back, eyes distant, perhaps already thinking about the next case, the next soul that might need reminding that money fades, but character echoes forever, and now it's your turn to decide. Do you think Judge Caprio went too easy on Melissa Vane, or should her arrogance have carried a harsher penalty? What would you have done in his place? Drop your thoughts below. Your opinion might start the next real debate on justice. If this story moved you, hit like, tap subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new case here on Real Judge Stories, where every courtroom moment reminds us that truth doesn't need to shout to be heard. Because in the end, power fades, but integrity, that's what leaves the echo.